Big deal at all on my part, and I'm just happy to be here and honored to be here and honored for those guests. And I'm going to do something amazing here, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you know I was a pilot in the Air Force. At one time, we flew I have the world's record for the fastest nonstop flight around the world. 36 hours, 13 minutes. On that mission, we dropped bombs on 3 different ranges. Even though we flew that long, every time we dropped a bomb, I hit that plus or minus 1 second. And today, I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, plus or minus 1 second. So I've got my timer here and ready to go. First thing I need to say, and I'm going to talk quickly because I cut 10 minutes down to 5. I want to recognize my wonderful wife, Evie, who is with me tonight, and she doesn't get to come very often. Thank you. When I was in the Air Force, before I flew jets, I flew helicopters for a while. And at one time I was in Spokane, and they used to get these powerful Chinook winds, 70, 80 knot winds at the surface. They'd come out of the Cascades and just blow in your face. And we were going from Spokane to Seattle. I was with a young student pilot in a helicopter, which isn't very fast in the first place. And we're flying fairly high because we're doing instrument mission, and we're hitting these Chinook winds, and dude, we're not going at all. And I'm waiting for him to recognize we're not going anywhere. And I kind of give him a little hint. Hey, how's our fuel look? Oh, yeah, sir, we're going to be good. I'm like, dude, no, we're not. We're going to flame out way before we get to Seattle. I waited as long as I could stand it, and I just couldn't stand it. Hey, how's our timing look? Our timing looks good, sir. We're going to be on time. Well, if you got a time machine, maybe we are. And I wait, and I realize, and finally I go to air traffic control, and I say, Senator, can you give us a ground speed check? Which is essentially, tell us how fast along the ground we're going. And there's a little bit of a pause, and he kind of chuckled, and Senator came back and said, I got you going 20 knots backwards. And that's true, we were. As our best efforts, we were still going backwards. And they say, Chris, why did you tell that story? Because I think it's an analogy for where many of us feel like we are today. We are out there flapping our wings, we are banging our heads against the wall, we're doing everything we can to try to save our country, and yet we get pushed back again and again. And there's a lot of things we could mention in that pushback. I'm going to mention just 2 or 3. One is we have a president who has pushed the bounds of his constitutional authority beyond what is acceptable and, in fact, beyond what is legal, which is why it is so important that we replace that Saint Justice Scalia with someone who will respect the Constitution. We also have this challenge of a headwind of regulators, just powerful regulators that feel like we got the boot of the federal government on our throats. And I'll just mention one, and that's the IRS. It will be a generation before we trust the IRS again, if we ever do. There's a number of others. I don't want to be a kind of a Debbie Downer today and list the problems. I actually want to leave with you another thought. Once in a while, we have success. We could list those. The Clean Power Plan. Thank you, Justice Scalia in the Supreme Court. We've had other successes with pushing back some of the regulators. We've had some success in politics. We've had some success in cutting our national debt, which is something that we don't often recognize. But I think the greatest victory, the greatest success, the greatest tailwind, if you will, that we have is this. We have this great blessing of knowing that we have the foundation of a perfect Constitution, a timeless Constitution. And every 4 years, that Constitution allows us to reset and to start over again with another president. And I believe this time is a time for us to reset. I think we're at the most, Abraham Lincoln is why we're here tonight. And I really mean what I'm about to say. I say this thoughtfully. I think this time, this moment is as important as anything we have been through since 1860, since Abraham Lincoln stepped up and saved our country. I think this is that critical of a moment. And I would remind you that in 1980, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Pope John Paul, they saved the world for another generation. we have the opportunity to do that as well. One last thought from Abraham Lincoln, if I could, who is, in my opinion, the greatest president this country's ever been blessed with. I wish I had time to tell you this story. I really do, but I'm going to just say this. In the middle of the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, which was, again, a tipping point, not just in the history of the United States, it was a tipping point for the future of the world. Because the United States was the only democracy in the world. There were parliamentary governments, there were military dictatorships. There was no other government like the United States, the only one in the world. And everyone in the world watched as the United States started to tear itself apart because they knew that only one of two things could happen. The United States would succeed and be a light to the world like we were, or we would take this idea of a people's government to the grave. And in the middle of the most important battle of that war, the Battle at Gettysburg, 3 days, during that battle, Abraham Lincoln was described as being in excellent spirits. And after the war, he was asked, how? Why were you? How could you do that at that moment of crisis? And he described saying, I knew that the moment of crisis had come. And I went to my room, and I locked the door, and I dropped to my knees. And I said, God, you have given us the greatest nation ever given to man. I have done everything in my power to save it, but I cannot take another defeat like at Chancellorsville or like at Fredericksburg. And he begged God to give them a victory at Gettysburg. And then he said, and I'll quote, he said, I don't know how it was, and I can't explain it, but a sweet spirit crept into my soul that God would take the whole affair into his own hands and that things would go all right at Gettysburg. Do you believe that God cares about this country? Because I think that he still does. Do you think God cares about the future of this world? Because I believe that he still does. And if the United States fails, if the United States even stumbles, this world will fail in a matter of weeks. I'm optimistic for our future because I think God still cares about this country. I think God still has miracles for this country. I think this moment, this election, this is a tipping point where we change the world like Ronald Reagan changed the world. That's why I'm optimistic. That's why I'm excited tonight. God bless you all. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.